Sup, step kids. Who is AZ actually? Well, he's a time-displaced regular dude who ended up working with an alien Pokemon in ancient Kalos who eventually caused a world-altering event. But you want to know how, right? How could this possibly be true? The minds of Game Freak could never conceive of such a cool and interesting backstory for a character. Or could they? Well, they did, and here's how. Pokemon X and Y presented us with many confounding conundrums, mostly centering around this guy, the ancient king of Kalos, the man who fired the ultimate weapon, the man who ended the Great War, the man with questionable taste in Pokemon. AZ. From the games, we get to learn a little bit about him, but Game Freak doesn't really like to get deep and dirty with the details. But here at the Patrick channel, we love to get deep and dirty in the details. So in today's episode of Everything You Need to Know Before Legends Z to A, we're going to examine all the available evidence to finally answer the question, who is AZ? Who is this man really? Is he even a man? Why is he so tall? Why is he so old? Why does he love this French patriot flower? Where did he come from? Where did he go? Where did he come from? Kalos King Joe. Who is AZ actually? This video is brought to you by your mum. That's right, she's actually sponsoring my content now. And don't worry, I'm not selling out. I don't receive any monetary reimbursement from her. But she does want me to tell you to like, comment, and subscribe. That's all she wants from you. Now, you wouldn't want to disappoint her, would you? Come on, you can do it. That's right. Just, mouse over it. Click that button. I mean, look how proud she is. She's so proud of you for doing that. Thanks to your mum for sponsoring this video. Back to AZ. So what does X and Y explicitly tell us about AZ? We meet him only a few times throughout the main campaign, and honestly, despite him being quite the yapper, we don't really learn that much. The first time we meet him is on Route 13, and whoa, holy shit, he's huge. But he just mumbles about the flower Pokemon and dips. He doesn't even see us, we're out of his peripheral, he's too tall. So from this encounter, we learn basically nothing. We learn that he's big, he's tall, and he likes flower Pokemon. We also see this funky key around his neck. Important. Next time we see him, Blood is locked up by Lysander. Don't ask how, my guy just kind of walked in there, I guess. 9-foot tall man overpowered by a furry. Seems unlikely. Anyway, AZ is locked up because Lysander wants the key around his neck. And while being locked up, AZ has the audacity, the absolute audacity, to drop his entire life story on a teenager and a freak. Now, if you've watched my last video, I go deep and dirty into AZ's war history. So watch that if you want the deep dive, but I'll drop the basics now. Seemingly ages ago, AZ loved this special French-colored floette very, very much. Then there was a war. His floette died in the war. Bro was so mad and sad by this, he made a futuristic flower-looking thing to revive his floette. After eternally reviving floette, Bro was still mad and sad, so he turned the flower machine thing into an ultimate flower machine thing of death laser gun thing called the ultimate weapon, and he used that weapon to end the war, killing both sides, destroying everything. That's basically it. Eternal French floette doesn't like that AZ killed hundreds of millions of thousands of it doesn't like that he killed a lot of Pokemon, so the floette f***ed off. AZ is ashamed and sad, so he just kind of walks around for 3,000 years, and that brings us to the present day. So that key that Lysander wants that's around AZ's neck, yeah, that's used to power the ultimate weapon. Okay, that's everything Bro says in this encounter. First question, did AZ violate the Geneva Convention by his use of the ultimate weapon? Answer, yes. His indiscriminate firing of the ultimate weapon seems to be in direct violation of Additional Protocol 1 of the Geneva Convention, and definitely would be considered a war crime under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Bro is certainly not adhering to the principle of distinction. Just look at this footage. This ended the war. Ain't no way this is just a military target. The proportionality report will not be justifying this. All my IHL homies know. Shout out to you at the gates. AZ for real just clicked the big red button and said, shit. If I kill the ICC, they can't prosecute me. He was a poet and a war criminal. So if anyone was wondering, AZ is a war criminal. But for realsies, this story raises a lot of questions about AZ. Namely, about AZ's role in the war and how the frickety frick-frack could he just make a revival machine and a death machine? How? It's 3,000 years ago and how did he do that? How did he do it? How? But before we answer that question, and we will answer that question, we have one more encounter to cover. At the very end of the game, after the player defeats the champion, AZ challenges the player to one final battle. Win or lose, Floette, after 3,000 years, decides to descend from the heavens and bless AZ with her presence. Floette forgives AZ of his war crimes and they float happily off into the sunset. Okay, yay, happy ending, I guess. The war criminal unites with his favorite flower. Let's hope for his sake there is a statute of limitations on the indiscriminate unaliving of Pokemon. So this final encounter doesn't really give us more. It just reaffirms that all of this stuff happened 3,000 years ago. 3,000 years since the firing of the ultimate weapon, 3,000 years since the end of the war, 3,000 years since Floette left AZ. So I'll pose the question again. How, 3,000 years ago, did AZ have the knowledge, the know-how, the understanding to create something like the ultimate weapon? A device that has both the ability to grant eternal life and also to take countless lives away. What did he know that we don't know? What did he know that the rest of the Pokemon world didn't know? But we know more about AZ. I know you know more about AZ. You watched my video where we explored the books in Lysander's library. You know that they drop a whole lot more info about who AZ is. In those books, and in Skiddo and Go-Goat's Pokedex entries, we learn that Kalos, way back in the day, 5,000 years ago, was just a basic agrarian society. Bros are just using Go-Goats to get the farming done. We also learned that it was only around 3,000 years ago, just before the war, that AZ showed up and started to bring Kalos unity and prosperity. He also brings with him unprecedented technology. AZ becomes king and he uses his technology to create an unparalleled era of unity and economic development in Kalos. One thing really interesting to note here is that the books say the technology is unlike anything seen in that era, which seems to suggest that it's time displaced or alien or something. It confirms there's definitely something up with AZ, like he's special or something. So let's see what other evidence we can analyze to make some more conclusive conclusions. We don't really have any information or knowledge on what this technology was, or what it did, or where it came from, but we do have 2 confirmed instances of it still being around in modern day Kalos. The first one, and you know it, it's the ultimate weapon. Yeah, that shit looks unearthly. Definitely seems like something not of the 3,000-year-old era, or even this era, to be honest. It has the power to absorb and harness the life force energy of Pokemon and redirect it anywhere, either into a Floette or into a destructive beam that destroys things. And we know from AZ's own admission earlier, he's the one that built it. The second example is the Anastar City sundial. We learned from Sycamore that the sundial's been there for about 3,000 years. Sycamore's claim about the age of the sundial seems to line up with the 3,000 year ago period where AZ was king. Funnily enough, it seems to also be made of a unique technology. Is there anyone that we know that's made unique technology that could have made that? Now, I'm not a betting man, but I would bet my entire life savings, my house, everyone that I love on the fact that it was AZ that built this. But I'm not a betting man. Just a random thing to note in Sycamore's hypothesis about the Anastar City sundial, he seems to believe that a legendary Pokemon was maybe used to help create it. Just random, not important, won't be important for the rest of this video. Much like the ultimate weapon, the Anastar City sundial seems to have some strange powers that interact with the player's Mega Ring. Sycamore hypothesizes that both Xerneas, Yveltal, and the Anastar City sundial all exert some kind of energy. Maybe a legendary Pokemon helping AZ make the sundial isn't so far-fetched. But hold up, before we go down the theory rabbit hole, let's hit the brakes a little and draw up a profile on what we know about AZ so far. This is our AZ profile, Who is Blood. His name is AZ. He's big, tall, and old. He first showed up in Kalos 3,000 years ago. He became king of Kalos. He had knowledge of and the ability to construct crazy technology. He had a strong relationship with his Floette. In an interview, Mazda actually expands on this. Apparently, the Floette is a gift from AZ's mother. So I guess we also know that he has a mom now. He made the ultimate weapon, also probably made the Anastar City sundial. He revived Floette. He fired the ultimate weapon, ending the war, and he's still alive after 3,000 years. So one question we haven't answered yet is, why does AZ live so long and why is he so big? Well, in that same interview I just mentioned, Masuda also clarifies that it was the light from the ultimate weapon hitting AZ during Floette's revival process that extended his lifespan and made him so big. So he wasn't always like this. It seems to be implied that before AZ used the ultimate weapon and was exposed to its light, he was just a regular dude. A normal-sized, less giant, less old, hopefully less homeless-looking, regular dude. So that's all we're really explicitly told about AZ in X and Y and by the devs. Not much, really. There's still a lot of mystery. We're still left with 2 major questions. Where did AZ come from? And where did AZ's technology or knowledge of technology come from? So now comes my favorite part of the video, where we draw on a much wider gamut of evidence to construct some theories to try and answer these questions. Then we'll do our weekly prayer ritual and rain dance to try and manifest these theories into reality inside future games. So I've got 3 theories that I want to examine here. The first one is that, and this is an adaptation of a favorite Kiskeym theory of mine, check it out in the description. The first one is that AZ worked in alignment with a legendary Pokemon to create the technology he created and to do the things he did. And the second one is that AZ is a faller like Annabelle or Ingo or the BDSP protag in PLA. AZ was displaced in time. And the third theory, well, you'll just have to wait for the third theory. Okay, let's lay the groundwork for the alien Pokemon assisting AZ theory. So we know Sycamore's theory about the Anastar sundial. He posits that maybe a legendary Pokemon was involved in the creation of it. He also says something interesting about the legendary Pokemon, who need to be captured by Lysander to power the ultimate weapon, seem to have something to do with the sundial in relation to Mega Evolution. Remember this quote? You were exposed to the legendary Pokemon's energy in Team Flare's secret HQ, and the Mega Ring has absorbed the power of the sundial. These 2 powers have combined to upgrade your Mega Ring. But did you know that the sundial is also said to be made out of extraterrestrial material? Anastar City's own map description raises this possibility. The next thing I'm gonna say, you might think is a stretch because there's nothing that confirms it outright, but if the sundial's material is from outer space, it had to get to Earth somehow. Now, what does Game Freak love to put in their games? That's right, craters. Often craters caused by meteors that fall from outer space. Curon, Eternatus, anybody? The sundial material came to Earth in the form of a meteor. But not only did this meteor contain the material for the Anastar City sundial, oh no! It also contained something far more important. Extraterrestrial life. Extraterrestrial Pokemon. Shocker, the legendaries are aliens. Xerneas and Yveltal, they're aliens. Far-fetched? I thought so at first, but as Kiskeym laid down the evidence and I walked down his red carpet of facts and knowledge, I experienced a phenomenon that is scientifically known as Pokemon theoretical knowledge synthesization transcendence. I was enlightened. So here it is. Here's the facts and knowledge. Xerneas and Yveltal might seem earthly on first inspection, because like this is just a deer, right? This is just a deer. But remember, these are not their only forms. Xerneas and Yveltal experience a cyclical existence unlike any other Pokemon we're aware of. They go from their awakened forms to either a cocoon or a rootless tree thing, and then back into their awakened forms in what seems like an endless, perpetual loop. Both Xerneas and Yveltal seem to go through phases of both leaking and absorbing the life force energy we see used in the ultimate weapon. Yveltal seems to absorb this energy in his awakened form, doing a mass absorption just before he becomes a cocoon, and Xerneas does a mass expulsion just before it becomes the tree thing. Now there's a lot of nuance to these forms and the function of the legendary's life cycle that we don't have time to get into today, but the Spark notes that both Xerneas and Yveltal seem to have an innate ability to manipulate this life force energy in an unearthly, un-Pokemon-y way, whilst also having incredibly idiosyncratic life cycles that seem to differ drastically from any other Pokemon or legendary Pokemon we know of. Hence, they're aliens. Now this Monsieur bloke in Anastar City and the Pokedex lay down some pretty important information about these legendaries. Both Xerneas and Yveltal seem to have been on Earth for at least 5,000 years, at least. And during that time, they've been actively shit up and messing with humans and Pokemon periodically. I'll slap a handy Kiskeym chart up here for your personal reference. Follow his Twitter for more handy charts. Now, you math geniuses out there might have noticed that Xerneas and Yveltal's 5,000 years survived by French oral tradition is a little bit longer than the 3,000 years ago that AZ arrived in ancient Kalos for the first time. This means for at least 1,000 years before AZ arrived in Kalos, Xerneas and Yveltal were shit up. Maybe the division described in Kalos before AZ achieved unity was centered around worshipping either Yveltal or Xerneas, something like we saw in PLA with the Diamond Clan and the Pearl Clan. But I think we might be forgetting something. There is a third legendary, a Pokemon that brings balance to the warring existences of Xerneas and Yveltal, Zygarde, the Order Pokemon. There seems to be a misconception that perhaps Zygarde is artificial in nature because of the Zygarde Cube in Sun and Moon. But actually, I'm pretty sure that the Zygarde Cube isn't something of human origin. It isn't something synthesized in a lab. We actually learn in the games that the Zygarde cube is something Sycamore found in Kalos. It's likely not of human design at all. Much like Xerneas and Yveltal, Zygarde seems to be alien itself. Unlike Xerneas and Yveltal, however, Zygarde may not have fallen in the same massive crystalline meteor. It seems that maybe just the cube fell to Earth by itself. Maybe it was sent here after Xerneas and Yveltal fell. Who knows? What I am sure of is that Zygarde is an alien. I mean, what other Pokemon can divvy itself up into different parts and reform in a cube? Sounds pretty alien to me. Zygarde is an
Me, you gotta stop with that. Just let me do my fucking bit, Jesus. Here we go.
But Patrick, it's Defender of the Ecosystem. It says so in its Dex entries. Why would an alien Pokemon care about order and balance in Earth's ecosystem? Ever think about that one? Actually a decent question though. But we should probably ask ourselves, what is balance in the ecosystem? What is order in the ecosystem? What does that actually mean? Don't forget, it's people that write the Pokedex entries from their observations. It's not like Zygarde waltzed up to a professor one day and explained his motives and actions in human language. Maybe it only ostensibly appears as if Zygarde is protecting the ecosystem as humans understand it. Maybe the order Zygarde is enforcing is actually the typical expected movement and flow of this life force energy. Both Xerneas and Yveltal mess with this expected cycle. They play games with the lives of people and Pokemon. Maybe Zygarde realizes the potential dangers of the mismanagement of this energy. Or, maybe he just hates the guts of Xerneas and Yveltal. If we look purely at the color scheme of its complete form, the opposing red and blue, it seems that Game Freak were hinting at Zygarde's powers being based around the balance of Xerneas and Yveltal's. Maybe they all come from the same alien planet or place or space. Maybe Zygarde is just your average alien cop. But how does Zygarde enforce this order? Why is it so uniquely suited to quell Xerneas and Yveltal? Aura Break. Its ability, Aura Break. In its 10% and 50% form, Zygarde has the ability Aura Break, which basically makes Xerneas and Yveltal's own auras work against them. Zygarde seems to have the innate power to subdue and reverse the effects of the others' power. But maybe Zygarde isn't able to completely control Xerneas and Yveltal unless it has its complete form. Pokemon Moon's Dex entry seems to imply that it's only when Zygarde has its complete form does it have enough power to completely overwhelm Xerneas and Yveltal. Maybe since Zygarde arrived on Earth, its cells and cores haven't been able to reform properly. And consequently, Zygarde wasn't able to bring order and balance to the ecosystem during Xerneas and Yveltal's ongoing clash. Maybe Zygarde needed outside help to achieve its complete form. Now this is where AZ comes in, and this is where things get kind of crazy. Now remember what I said this theory was about? It was about AZ working with an alien Pokemon to help create the technology he created. Now if you're a discerning viewer, you might have already connected the dots. Zygarde is that Pokemon. Zygarde is the alien Pokemon that helps AZ. Zygarde needed outside help to recover its cores and cells so it could finally bring order to the ecosystem that was being ravaged by Xerneas and Yveltal. In return for this, Zygarde enabled AZ to use Aura Break to build his Colosian society and protect it from Xerneas and Yveltal during their awakened states. This Aura Break is what enables the ultimate weapon to subdue the legendaries. But that doesn't seem to be the whole story. Aura Break doesn't even account for all of the abilities of the ultimate weapon. Once Xerneas and Yveltal are subdued, how is their energy manipulated? This makes me think there's even more to AZ's technology than meets the eye. His technology's power is not all from Zygarde. And why AZ? Why does Zygarde choose AZ to help it? Well, this brings me to my second and third theories. Now, back in the day, AZ being a faller or a time traveler seemed to be all the rage in Pokemon theorizing circles. But I've noticed as we've delved further into the 3D era, its popularity has fallen off. I'm here to change that. I think AZ is a faller for two big reasons. One, AZ's technology seems to be able to freely manipulate Xerneas and Yveltal's life force energy. And we know that this power to manipulate life force energy is a current day human technology. And two, this AZ-Faller theory really helps reaffirm AZ's stated motivations for firing the ultimate weapon, and it also explains the state we find Zygarde in at the end of Pokemon X and Y. So first of all, AZ is a faller from the future, potentially from before the events of X and Y in the scale of 3,000 years, but just as likely or even more likely, further in the future. It's likely that he's from beyond any setting we've ever seen in the main series. In Oras, if you go digging through the files at Seymourville, you'll come across these confidential documents, which drop maybe just the most important information in the entire series. In the Devon Secret Investigation Report, we learned that the Devon Corporation was secretly researching the extraction and manipulation of Pokemon bioenergy, which, by the way, they were successful in doing. This extracted and manipulated bioenergy is called infinity energy. Now, the big question is this infinity energy the same thing as the life force energy used by both Xerneas and Yveltal? I think the answer is technically yes, which I personally think is an answer that the Pokemon community take for granted. I think infinity energy is only probably the same thing as life force energy for a bunch of complicated reasons that are way too much for this video. It deserves an entire separate breakdown, so expect that one coming up next. But for now, let's continue with the assumption that infinity energy and Xerneas and Yveltal's life force energy are the same thing. We also learn in the Delta episode from Mr. Stone that his grandfather is the one that actually created infinity energy. He created the means to manipulate life energy into whatever humans needed it for. Now, how did he do this? He did it by studying the ultimate weapon. You might be thinking, wait a minute, are you saying that infinity energy was only developed through studying the ultimate weapon? But AZ built the ultimate weapon and only knew about infinity energy because he was from the future where they had learned how to synthesize infinity energy from studying the ultimate weapon? Are you saying that AZ is creating a direct bootstrap paradox here? Yes, I am. I know, but the thing is, you play with time travel, you get paradoxes. But you know what? Game Freak has a very recent history of explicitly discussing time travel and paradox and paradoxical events and things. You know, Scarlet and Violet, the Kitakami Pool DLC bookhanding paradox thing, even just Ingo and the player falling back in time in PLA. These all create these self-fulfilling paradox things. Look, there's precedence for paradoxes, okay? It's cool. Game Freak thinks it's cool, we think it's cool. It's cool, paradoxes are cool. I actually believe there's a greater macro narrative behind all of these time displacement and fallers, apart from the reasons we see in PLA. There is a greater force at play, but the deep exploration of that idea is for a video at the end of this series. But basically, there's precedence for bootstrap paradoxes and fallers. So here's the theory. I think AZ is a faller from the future, or at least the modern day, who had the know-how to manipulate infinity energy. He used this know-how to create crazy technologies that united ancient Kalos and brought them into an unrivaled period of economic success and established geopolitical dominance in the area. You know, AZ, before he fell, he might have just been a humble Devon Corporation worker, maybe an engineer, who knows? But he did have the knowledge of how to manipulate infinity energy. So AZ falls into good old pre-war ancient Kalos with his brother and Floette. He's just been time displaced. His brother and his Floette are the only things that tie him back to home. Now remember, we looked at this available evidence before, but it's very likely that during this time period, Xerneas and Yveltal were still out there f***ing it up. They're still warring. They were making it hard to live for the average Joe. Especially hard to live if you're not part of a society and you've just fallen out of the sky with your brother and a flower. So AZ, he had to use his technological knowledge to create technologies that would protect his brother and his Floette. Meanwhile, Zygarde is just sitting there watching Xerneas and Yveltal war, thinking to himself, oh God, if I could just reform into my complete form right now, I would core enforce these fools so bad. But unfortunately for Zygarde, he can't for whatever reason. He needs his cells and cores to be collected for him. Then Zygarde notices a man who seems to exceed the capabilities of every other human present at that time, a man who seems to have knowledge of things he shouldn't have. Maybe this human could help Zygarde. Since AZ's arrival in Kalos, he had started to build a cult following with his technology and his ability to provide for people. But remember, Xerneas and Yveltal are still warring. AZ needs protection. AZ needs protection from Xerneas and Yveltal. He needs something like Aura Break. Zygarde and AZ seem to have an alignment of interest in the subduing of Xerneas and Yveltal. Zygarde wants to establish order in the ecosystem, and AZ just wants to protect and provide for the people he's leading. They both also seem to be able to help each other reach their personal goals. Zygarde agrees to lend his aura break to AZ to imbue and embed in his technology. If AZ in return helped reassemble Zygarde, just like the player does in the Sun and Moon. Now this plan, it seems to be going great. Everything seems to be going super well. With AZ's help, Zygarde is already up to his 50% form. AZ is able to create amazing technologies that protect his kingdom with the help of Zygarde's aura break. But eventually, as discussed in my previous video, AZ's brother plots against AZ's kingdom. When this happened, AZ lost one of the two things that connected him to his past. He lost his brother. All he's left with is his floette, a gift from his mother, a mother he can likely never see again. But we all know the story. AZ also ends up losing floette in the war. Miraculously, AZ uses his incredible technology and Zygarde's aura break to capture one of the legendaries temporarily and manipulate its life force energy to revive his floette. But he still can't forgive those who almost destroyed his only connection to his past life. AZ breaks his promise with Zygarde and uses his knowledge and aura break to capture the legendaries again and turn the ultimate revival machine into the ultimate weapon. AZ destroys everything. And after learning that Floette now hates his guts, AZ walks around aimlessly and shamefully for the next 3,000 years. And Zygarde stuck at its 50% form. And it stayed that way for the next 3,000 years. This is why we don't see Zygarde in its complete form in X and Y. This is why Zygarde seems to be inactive during Xerneas and Yveltal's post-war awakenings. This is why the Zygarde cube was found in Kalos by Sycamore. So that's my theory. AZ is a faller who aligned with Zygarde to help bring ancient Kalos much prosperity. At the thought of losing everything that tied him to his past life, AZ broke his deal with Zygarde, destroying everything and leaving us with the situation we have now. But you know what AZ and Zygarde's relationship remind me of? What's another human and legendary Pokemon pair that seem to be working towards aligned goals? I'll answer it for you. Volo and Giratina. This connects to my third theory, which I can only give breadcrumbs for now because this is part of my final theory at the end of this series. Remember, I said you'd have to wait for my third theory. But here's the gist of it. Remember how Volo got Giratina to tear open that space-time rift? I think that was the beginning of a cycle of events that caused Arceus to necessitate the creation of Mega Revolution. We know that Arceus seems to prefer to work through people and Pokemon to achieve its means rather than directly interfering. That seems to be the whole storyline of Legends Arceus. The player is sent back to slow Volo's approach to Arceus, as opposed to Arceus just smiting down Volo straight away. After Volo's defeat in Legends Arceus, we learn that he'll do anything to meet and conquer Arceus, no matter how long it takes. Would it be possible that Game Freak is finally making a cohesive, connected macro narrative that spans games? Could Volo end up being the ultimate villain of every Legends game? I think this is more likely than it initially seems. I think AZ was sent back in time by Arceus to create the conditions that would ultimately lead to Mega Evolution and other Pokemon phenomena. The creation of this phenomena will be necessary to defeat Volo before he's able to complete his master plan. But how is Volo getting to Arceus again? And why would Mega Evolution be necessary to stop him? All this may seem like a long shot now, but just you wait. The final reveal of this theory will shock you and your mom. You'll have to wait a bit though. It won't be revealed until the end of this Everything You Need to Know Before Legends Z-Day series. However, don't despair. You'll continually get little breadcrumbs in every video I make between now and then. I don't know, maybe you'll even be able to solve it before the theory comes out. But I have to lay down some more groundwork in those videos first. So get excited for the rest of this series. It ended up being a way more gargantuan project than I thought it would be. You know, Pokemon lore is actually pretty cool and way deeper than I thought, and it's way deeper than I thought. So that's it. That's everything you need to know about AZ. That's the whole thing. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow my Twitter @PatrickYourMum, and I will see you at the gates.